Family, my mother, my children, my nieces, my nephews, my grandchildren, my husband. Once a husband, always a husband. Psych. Nobody in my family, I don't know if they know this, but I speak every Sunday at church. The pastor appointed me to give some words of inspiration every Sunday some time ago. And I didn't tell you guys because I knew if y'all know that they gave me a mic, y'all might not come. So I never really mentioned that, but those who've been here before, they know. So I'm not going to talk long because, as you know, we're on a tight schedule for today. You know, and everybody said it, my heart is overjoyed in a way that I haven't felt this kind of joy in a long, long, long time. And Pastor was right. I love my children. I love my children. You know, y'all know my story, but I'm sober today. I'm a woman in recovery because of my children. I didn't love myself enough to do nothing about what I was doing to myself, but I loved them enough. The look that I saw in their eyes, I knew was a look I couldn't live with. And I knew in order to keep living, I had to do something. And I had to do something that was different from anything that I had seen anybody done. Because people weren't, at that time, we didn't know the damages. We didn't know how deadly drugs were. And, you know, illegal drugs anyway. They were like pastimes, you know. But to jump fast forward, and it was 2005. My son had gone up to Vallejo and was staying with a friend up there, and we talked, and I encouraged him. I said, son, you know, they're having a musical at the church. Why don't you come? And my husband was here at the time, and somehow, God realigned our lives in a way that we all sat right here, right on that side of the church that Sunday. And there was a musical here that day, and I remember watching Joseph pat his feet and pat his hands, and I remember thinking that, you know, like I didn't know how precious all of our lives were in a lot of ways until that moment. And I sat there being so grateful that my son was here, being so grateful that I was here and I was in my right mind, and being so grateful that we just had that time. It was just one of them, you know, fluke kind of situations where we all landed here together that day. And Tika, there was a musical, and Tika was singing. I've been running behind her singing for 30 years. And they had a raffle, and there were tickets taped under seats. And so some of the saints were kind of, you know, having trouble bending over trying to see if there was a ticket under the bench. And so Joseph said he could see them, and he said, I'll look, I'll help you. So he ended up, thank you, baby, he ended up helping all throughout the church. And I looked up, and it was Tika and Joseph running the raffle. I said, wow, how'd that happen? But they ran the raffle and gave away all the gifts. And I remember thinking that day that, you know, I felt like God's love and grace and mercy in my life that day was just so kind that I could be here. Y'all know some of my son's stories. None of his friends were here. You know, all the friends. And so I knew that what I was seeing and what I was experiencing was very, very, very special. And I knew that it was only God's grace and love and mercy that was making that time so for me. And so after service that day, we went and ate, and I took him back to Vallejo. And when I dropped him off, because I didn't want to, you know, call him out in the church, because I wanted to bring him up here and have all the saints lay hands on him and pray for him and all of that. But Spirit told me to keep my mouth shut. Yeah. So I did that. But when I was coming back from Vallejo that night, I remember crying out to God from Vallejo all the way to Oakland saying, thank you, God. Thank you for sparing me and my children's life. Thank you for holding on to us until we could do something different with our lives. And I cried all the way to Oakland. And I knew people was looking at me thinking I was crazy. Because I didn't react. See, the tears were flooding. But I cried out and I just told God, thank you, because, you know, there were times before that my spirit had been so perplexed and so troubled and so confused. And I had a chance, you know, you're really blessed when you get to look back at your life and you see mistakes and you say, you know what, I was wrong right there. You know, you're really blessed when you get to say, as a parent, as a woman, I was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. That was a poor choice and an unwise decision, and I've lived long enough to do that with my life. And so I don't hold anybody accountable for the poor choices and the unwise decisions that I've made. And God has strengthened me well enough and big enough that I can stand in every poor choice and unwise decision I've ever made, and I'm not afraid of none of them. Because God's bigger than even those choices and those decisions. And so, but I remember leaving here just feeling a sense of encouragement and strength where my son was concerned, that I had never felt before, that I hadn't felt in a long time. And, you know, to fast forward maybe like a couple weeks after that, I think, he ended up getting arrested. And he in the courtroom, he told everybody, look, my mama didn't raise me to take the roads I took. My father didn't raise me to take the roads I took. My grandparents. I landed where I landed because of the choices and decisions that were available to me at the time. He didn't even say that I wanted to make. He said that were available to me at the time. And, you know, and so he left, and, you know, I knew, he said, you know, I'm glad to have all this behind me. I'm glad this is over with, that I get to have a life and live a real life. Well, you know, we all know the story. He came back, and then all those unfortunates that I'm not going to get into, but I remember trying to tell people what was going on, and I couldn't, because I didn't know how to explain it. Other than, you know, the police had set my son up. I knew that much, but I couldn't explain it no other kind of way. And I remember, you know, being in denial during that time, and I would go to the courtroom every time he had a court date, and I didn't even know if he knew this, but had a bag of clothes packed, because I knew that, you know, they was wrong, and they knew they was wrong, and they was going to let my son go, and I was bringing them clothes so he could wear them clothes home. And I went month after month after month after month, and it didn't happen. And I cried and I prayed and I cried and I prayed and I cried and I prayed, and that's all I could do. Well, you know, eventually the trial came. And I remember I'd never been through a trial. I didn't know what that meant or what was going on. And I worked in the legal system. But I never sat through a trial. I didn't know nothing about that. But and I was talking about it at church, asking for prayers, and my pastor said, oh, you know, and I was a member then, but because I came here a long time before I even joined, but my pastor said, you know, we're gonna walk with you. And I didn't even know what that meant, but I knew when I heard him say that, I felt better and I felt encouraged. And what I learned that meant was that every court date my son had, my pastor and my church family came with me.